very, very lonely.
All right, I believe we're live online, so what you're seeing here is a big gathering at the corner of Simcoe and King, just outside Roy Thompson Hall, where Steve Bannon is taking part in a Munk debate against David Frum. And the debate was set to begin at 7 o'clock. It still hasn't started. There's still quite a bit of a lineup outside the hall itself, and so they're taking their time patting down people. There have been at least one clash between protesters and police officers. We saw 3 people taken away in handcuffs after there was a bit of a scuffle rather. When police actually ended up taking down a couple of protesters. We missed the beginning of it, but caught the tail end, and 3 protesters were taken away in handcuffs.
Sometimes the best thing.
Here we see a bit of singing, obviously, as part of the protest here. And it looks like they've taken their attention away from directly outside Roy Thompson Hall. There was a lot of yelling and protesting and heckling of the attendees. But the protest has now incorporated a bit of music and singing.
You can actually see swallow if you look very high, very high, very high. Sometimes the worst things happen on Friday.
All right, we're going to take you a little bit around Roy Thompson Hall, and we see the singing protest happening here. We've been told there's at least 1,000 protesters here tonight protesting Trump's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon, and he's been called the poster boy of white supremacy. He used to be the head of Breitbart News, which is a right-wing website, and so there's been a lot of protests and heckling of the attendees, saying that they're encouraging that sort of hateful and racist rhetoric by attending this debate, this Munk debate between Steve Bannon and David Frum. Now let's take a bit of a walk. We're going to show you the police officers here. They've blocked off Simcoe here. This is actually King Street that they've blocked off, and it's at Simcoe. And as you can see, the lineup is still actually happening. Here, the debate itself was set to begin at 7 o'clock, but it's now 7:20, past 7:20, and not everybody who has tickets to this Munk debate are inside yet. The lineup is significantly shorter, but still people waiting to get in. So obviously this debate is very delayed, and you can tell it definitely is because of police having their hands full. There's been some very, I guess, persistent patting down, and police even, as I mentioned, had a clash with protesters. 3 protesters were taken away in handcuffs after there was a bit of aggression and physical pushing and shoving up against these railings here. And police ended up tackling and taking down 3 protesters and handcuffing them and then escorting them away. Still some heckling and some signs and some yelling. There was a lot of yelling of shame, and calling attendees Nazis here. It's died down a little bit. You can still see some people yelling shame and heckling the attendees here. There's a wall of police officers here as well that had to step in. There weren't that many to begin with, but we heard police officers calling in reinforcements, asking more bodies to be down here, and they've set up a big wall here between the Munk debate attendees and the protesters here.
Yeah, $50 million on a fence. Sounds like sounds like you're in the right place. Spending a lot of money on fences. It sounds like you're talking to the right people. Maybe you're the only one here that should go in.
We're taking you down the lineup here where attendees are still waiting to get in. There's been a lot of patting down, and there's been several delays in getting people inside. People who have tickets to the sold-out Munk Debate featuring Trump's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon, who's been called a racist, who's been called a white supremacist, and he is arguing in favor of populism. That's the crux of the debate here. David Frum, Steve W. Bush's former speechwriter, he is on the other side of the debate here and taking on Bannon in this debate. And obviously a big crowd opposing the appearance of Steve Bannon. And as I mentioned, this was supposed to begin at 7 p.m. and people with tickets are just making their way through. There's still a lineup that rounds the corner on King Street here. And as you can tell, people are being patted down. Lots of thorough security checks here. And they're trying to move things along here. You can see staff waving people down. And as I mentioned, there was some stalling and some halts in the actual process of people getting in because there was some protesting and some aggression, and that definitely slowed down things. And also police had to sort of intervene at times and make sure that everyone was safe. There was a rocking of the fences, and you can see the fences are being moved back here as well. Media are being told to go back as well, give some extra room here. And things seem to be, I guess, picking up once again. They're trying to create extra room and trying to get more people through very quickly because, once again, this debate was supposed to begin at 7. There's still a long lineup of attendees waiting to go through to the sold-out Munk Debate. Now you can see a big crowd starting to make its way in. You know, they were trying to bring in people one by one, but now we're seeing them come in clusters into this debate, into Roy Thompson Hall. Police officers on horseback as well over there at the end of the street here, at the end of the block here on Simcoe.
How you guys doing today?
Police officers moving the fencing back here and setting up bicycles as well. And you can tell they're pushing protesters back as well here. Much of the, I guess, protesting and congregating is happening closer towards King. There's a protest and a microphone and singing and chanting at the corner of King and Simcoe. But they pushed all the protesters back. Signs here, there was lots of signs saying shame and that they're against this debate happening here. Shouts of Nazis at the attendees here, shouts of shame. Now we also spoke to some of the attendees who are just shocked. I guess some of them didn't know this protest was happening. We spoke to a couple of poli-sci students at U of T who were attending the debate who wanted to just, you know, I guess what they said, broaden their political knowledge of populism and they felt scared, they said. They felt very targeted, and one of them was nearly in tears. So that's what's happening at the other side of the fence. Some people are just taken aback, shocked. Other attendees, though, we see some of them smiling and arguing and just laughing off the protesters. Some of them are recording the protesters on their phones. So just a variety of reactions by the attendees themselves. As I mentioned, some are upset, shooken up, taken aback by the amount of protesters and being called Nazis. Others are just laughing it off and are paying no mind to these protesters here. Some instruments brought into the protest here. There was marching, there was chanting, there was yelling and cries of shame and Nazi, and now some drums have been brought into the protest as well to add a little bit of flair and a little bit of noise into this rally. No hate, no fear, fascists are not welcome here is the newest chant that these protesters have picked up. Hey, do you think we're okay? Do you mind just asking Sean? I don't have his number. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be hot for a little while. Well, I mean, mean, I'm just more concerned about battery life because we need to feed everything back and pull stuff from CO2. And so, I mean, we can go for a little bit longer. I just wanted to make sure, it's not just a wasted effort, right? Like they're actually taking it. Okay. Sure. Okay. You know what? We'll go for another 10 because also Will's been walking around his back. It's not really working, so yeah. Because you can clock, right? So okay. Thanks so much. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. All right, we're seeing the lineup move actually a lot faster now as they move the fences back. They're able to cram in maybe 2 or 3 lines now for attendees to get the show moving. I think there is a bit of a push and pressure on the organizers to get this debate going because, like I mentioned, it's supposed to start at 7 o'clock and it's 7:35 now. And the event itself is way behind schedule, obviously due to, in large part, because of this protest. Police have had to come here in waves and have set up a bit of a wall here. There was a bit of a clash here between protesters and police officers. 3 people were taken away in handcuffs after. There was, it looked like a bit of an attempt from protesters. There was some nudging and pushing along the fence here, and we missed the beginning of it, so no idea, to be quite frank, what caused the clash between protesters and police officers, but at the end of it, there were 3 protesters that were taken down. We saw that, and they were taken away in handcuffs. Now, there's been a lot of yelling by the protesters at the attendees, screams of Nazis, fascists, shame has been the most common phrase being yelled at these attendees.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
But in large part, the protest along Simcoe has dwindled down quite a bit just because, for 2 reasons. It looks like some of the protesters have diverted home, but there's also been a big wave that have made their way to the intersection of Simcoe and King, where there is a microphone and there's a big gathering as people are taking turns speaking into the microphone, and different social justice groups and anti-hate groups are standing in front of the microphone and relaying their message to the public about protesting this Munk debate. Now, one of the organizers, actually several of the organizers, have also been saying that some of the protesters got pepper sprayed. We didn't see it ourselves, and nor can we confirm this, but that has been a consistent point of sensitivity for these protesters, saying that these police officers are taking the sides of these attendees, and that a handful of them were pepper sprayed. Once again, we did not see this ourselves or can confirm it, but that seems to be the rhetoric that these protesters are using, that there was pepper spray used by these police officers. And so there is some aggression, some anger, and some hate, not only towards these attendees, but it looks like some of the protesters have turned on the police officers themselves. Some drummers have come into play, and they are obviously making lots of noise here. There was singing to add to all the chanting. I mean, in the beginning of it all, when this all first started, closer to 5:30, 6 o'clock, there was a lot of the rhetoric and language was around hate and shame, trying to, I guess, intimidate in a lot of ways the attendees. Some of the attendees who we spoke to were a couple of poli-sci students from U of T who were really taken aback by the protesters, not knowing that it would be this aggressive, and one of them was nearly in tears, saying that she wanted to see a debate on populism, and she didn't know there was so much anger and aggression targeted towards the event itself and towards the attendees of the events. And on the other side of the fence, obviously, there are the protesters who are saying that by attending this event, by paying hundreds of dollars to be a part of this event, you are supporting the white supremacist and nationalist rhetoric that Steve Bannon is most commonly known for. So that's the conflict on both sides of the coin here. Now this is a pretty big development here. You're seeing, instead of one lineup, you're seeing multiple lineups of the attendees crammed closer to the entrance here. That is new, and that has only happened in the past few minutes because I think they're trying to get the show on the road here. There was a long lineup on both sides of the entrance of Roy Thompson Hall that was spanning the street and even turning the corner here. And what police just did in the last few minutes is pull the fence back and cram more attendees into that space there in front of Roy Thompson Hall. So they're really trying to get the show going. It started at 7 o'clock. It was supposed to start at 7 o'clock. Obviously, it's almost 7:45, so way, way behind schedule. And I think the organizers are really just trying to get things going here. See people being patted down, and they're going through their security check. Things are moving along much faster now as there are several lineups instead of that one original lineup. Once again, the show well behind schedule here, set to start for 7 o'clock, and there must be some pressure by the organizers to get the show going here, because the debate is already about 45 minutes behind schedule here. You can see a lineup of police officers here. They have pushed the fence back, and the number of protesters once again has dwindled down quite significantly here. All right, so the protest still in full swing here, even though the numbers have dwindled down a little bit. As I mentioned, people are moving into the Roy Thomson Hall much quicker here. I'm with one of the protesters here. Sir, what's brought you out here today?
Well, I'm here today to sort of show my... Sorry, can I...
No worries. You know, what do you think of the number of people that showed up to protest Steve Bannon here? I mean, it's quite the number. Even the organizers themselves do admit that they weren't expecting this much of a turnout.
Well, I mean, I'm not, especially considering last weekend's events in Pittsburgh, I'm not surprised that people have shown up in numbers to confront the politics of division and hatred. The kind of program that Steve Bannon has actual real life consequences for people. So I feel like people are upset and angered that this is happening, that he's been given a greater platform, and that, you know, this is an opportunity for him to legitimize his kind of hate speech.
What's your message to these attendees? I mean, there's been some very aggressive language being used against them, but if you could have a cordial debate with them, what would you tell them?
Well, I feel like people should consider where they're putting their money, and if they feel like giving Steve Bannon $200 to forward his program, to me that seems a little unfortunate, a bit disgusting, but you know, the argument of free speech, freedom of speech does not mean freedom of consequences for your speech. So clearly, if you're going to endorse this kind of hateful rhetoric, then people are going to respond.
What do you think of some of the tactics by the protesters, though? Do you think some of it went over the line, or do you think some of what they're yelling and you know, there was even 3 arrested? Do you think it's just in terms of some of the actions by the protesters?
I'm not sure if it's necessarily going to be the most convincing, but sitting back politely while history passes by has led to all kinds of horrors throughout time. So if you don't confront this kind of overt hatred with action, it'll just continue on.